here for anybody else who is joining us or will be joining us. My name is John Paul. I've been at the AAA now for more than 35 years. One of the names I go by is AAA's Car Doctor. If you've read this morning's newspaper, Long Island Newsday today, you can see my column in the paper today. I answer people's car questions. I write about different car problems. I tend to review a lot of different cars. I look at a variety of cars, not that much exotics, but more cars that people drive on a regular basis. Before I came to work at AAA 35 years ago, I worked as an automotive technician. I did that for a bunch of years, and a job came up at AAA where we actually ran a business called the Automobile Diagnostic Center. The Automobile Diagnostic Center was a business that we ran out of our main office where people would bring their cars and would tell them what was wrong with it. We did that for about 20 years. We moved our headquarters building from Rockland, Massachusetts down to Providence, Rhode Island, and we didn't take the diagnostic center with us. But I still stay up on everything I can. I also host a little radio show on Saturday morning in the Boston area. So I talk about cars and car problems and different things and try to help people with their variety of problems. If you do have a question, you can put it in the chat, or I can unmute your microphone, I think, at some point, and we can figure out how to do that. Or maybe sometimes on Zoom, if you press down the space bar, I think it unmutes the microphone. So if you press down the space bar, I think it unmutes the microphone on Zoom. That's how we've done some programs. Maybe it's something that has to be set up. I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, so we'll try to answer your questions either in the chat or in real time. I have a little presentation that I want to do. It's sort of Car Care 101. It's pretty straightforward and simple, but it's questions that I get on a regular basis, and we'll just kind of go over some of those. And again, if you have any kind of particular questions, let me know. Turn your camera on so I can see you, and we can kind of go from there. So let me get over to our presentation here. That again, we're calling it Car Care 101. And here we go. And some of the questions I get, again, on a pretty regular basis: true or false, do I need to change the oil in your car every 3,000 miles? Well, the answer to that is actually false, because a lot of people think they need to do it because that's what they've been doing for years and years and years. And it is not true. You don't need to change the oil in your car every 3,000 miles. You need to do it when the owner's manual tells you you need to do it. If you do it too often, there's no harm other than it costs you a little bit more money. True or false, when my car is new, if I don't go back to the dealer for service, it will void the warranty. I get this question probably once a month from a reader. They just bought a new car. The dealer told them if they don't come back for service, it's going to void the warranty. That is absolutely not true. In fact, you don't have to bring it to a repair shop at all. If you like to do things yourself, you can do them yourself. And as long as you keep track, as long as you follow the time schedule in the owner's manual. So for instance, oil changes, my personal car, it says to change the oil every 6 months or every 7,500 miles. The Volkswagen that we have, the newer one, the 2015, it's once a year or every 10,000 miles. Even the old Volkswagen we have is once a year or every 10,000 miles. So as long as you follow the directions in the owner's manual, you will not void the warranty. My suggestion is, even if you don't save your receipts for work, keep a log book, so if you ever had a warranty issue, you can say, no, on this date I did this, on this date I did this, so you can keep track of it all. All gasoline is created equal. Well, I always thought that was true. I thought if you bought gasoline at Joe's Gas and you bought gas at the Shell station, they were all the same, because I would see the same tanker truck fill up the tanks at the independent shop, and I would see them fill up the tanks at the brand name station. They are actually different. There are different additives in some gasoline. All gasoline has to have a minimum additive amount, but in some gasoline, and it's referred to as top tier gasoline. Top tier gasoline is gasoline that has an extra additive put in it to try to keep the gas in your engine cleaner, but also to keep your engine a little bit cleaner. TopTierGas.com is a good place to go find that information. And we did a bunch of tests at work at AAA using a lab, and we tested engines for a long period of time. And we wanted to see if carbon deposits build up on the engine, inside the valves, on top of the pistons. And in fact, what we saw was top tier gasoline would keep the engine cleaner, and a cleaner engine performs better. The good thing is you don't have to use top tier gasoline all the time, but if you use it once a month or so, it's a good idea. And most of the time it's name brands. It could be Shell or Mobil or Exxon, but a lot of name brands. Not that many of the discounters like BJ's and Sam's Club and Murphy's at the Walmart and places like that are not top tier gasoline. So near my house at home, there's a Stop and Shop supermarket. The Stop and Shop supermarket has discount points where if you spend so much money in the supermarket, it takes off so many cents per gallon for gas. Their gasoline is not top tier. So my wife tends to fill her car up there to save a little bit of money. So once in a while, I fill it up with a little bit better grade of gasoline. Now, not octane. If your car requires 87 octane, that's all you need to use. If your car requires 91 or 93 octane, that's what you need to use. If you open the gas door and it says recommended, not required, you can use a lower octane gasoline. It won't cause any harm. It may reduce your fuel economy just a little bit. It may reduce your performance just a little bit. So for instance, Mark, with your Miata, which is not a terribly powerful engine, it's one of the most fun cars to drive there is. If that car, for instance, said use premium fuel recommended, and you just used 87, you might notice if you're an aggressive driver, you might notice that the car didn't perform quite as well as it did with the better grade of gasoline. But I think, Mark, your car requires just 87 octane, so you're all set. How often should my tires on my car be rotated? Every 5,000, 7,000, 10,000, 20,000? Never, it's too much work. Well, it's kind of funny. Years ago, when tires were inexpensive, it almost made sense not to rotate the tires, because you'd go in, you get your tires rotated, it costs $50. And tires didn't cost that much, so you'd just let them wear out. No one cared. But generally, once or twice a year is a good time to rotate the tires. It's also a good excuse when you take the wheels off that you can inspect the tires and see not just how good the tires are, but how good the brakes are and the rest of the steering and suspension system. The Volkswagen, the 2015 Volkswagen we have, only has 25,000 miles on it. It was manufactured in 2014. The tires were original, and the tires were starting to dry rot and crack just because of age. And I just replaced them with some Goodyear Viva 3s, which were fairly inexpensive, but they seem to perform pretty well, and they're doing everything they're supposed to do. Antifreeze, a lot of times it's called permanent antifreeze. The picture on the left says right there, permanent antifreeze. And we call it engine coolant, mostly lasts the life of the car. That is not true, even though it says it's permanent. Antifreeze does need to be changed periodically, depending on the vehicle manufacturer. Some cars 5 years, some cars 3 years, some cars a little bit longer, maybe up to 6 or 7. Look in your owner's manual. More importantly, too, is if you are doing this work yourself, or your repair shop's even doing it, make sure they use the right engine coolant for the vehicle. There are now at least 8 different kinds of engine coolant on the market, and they match different vehicles. Chrysler uses something different than Volkswagen uses. Toyota uses something different than General Motors uses. So you want to make sure you use the proper coolant for your car, because it does have some different qualities and chemicals in it that can affect the way that antifreeze will work in your car. Now, if it's an emergency, you're driving down the road and all of a sudden your temperature light goes on, you let the car cool off a little bit, you pull into a gas station and all they have is kind of a generic antifreeze coolant and you're topping off, that's fine. But if you're doing it as a regular service where you drain all the engine coolant out and put fresh coolant in, then you really need to think about using the right kind that matches the car. True or false, will an aftermarket remote car starter void the car's warranty? I was shopping with someone. They were looking for a Honda CR-V, and they wanted a remote car starter. That was one of the features they wanted in the vehicle, and it didn't come with it. And the dealer said, "Oh, we can put one in," and I think they wanted $1,000 to put it in. And I kind of just spouted off, "That sounds kind of expensive." And they said, the salesperson said, "Well, if you don't use our remote car starter, it'll void the car's warranty." That is absolutely not true. If that aftermarket warranty, aftermarket remote starter is installed correctly and they don't damage anything, it will not void the warranty. In fact, you're protected by something called the Magnuson-Moss law. In fact, what was kind of interesting, I was at an automotive stereo store, automotive electronics store, and I was telling the owner about this story about how the dealer said, you have to use our product. If not, it would void the warranty. And he said to me, he asked me who the dealer was, and I told him. He said, "Oh, it's kind of funny because we do all of their installations for them." So they were just trying to roll that extra $1,000 into the price of the car as part of the loan. And again, you can, those are things you can do yourself. And you can have someone, you can either put a remote car starter in, there's all kinds of YouTube videos, or you can pay a professional to do it, which would be my recommendation. Checking a car's oil is early. It's easy to do. It is nothing more difficult than finding the engine oil dipstick. When the engine is warm but not hot, pull the dipstick out, wipe it off with a clean cloth, put it back in, and there's markings on the dipstick and it'll say either full or add. You should never overfill, so only fill up to the full mark. Checking engine coolant is almost as easy. This car is actually my car, I think that picture came from. And there's a minimum and maximum line. If you fill it up so it's somewhere in between, if you routinely see it at the low, at the minimum level, there's probably some sort of a leak that should be attended to. And again, use the proper coolant for the car. That's important. And brake fluid, you'll see brake fluid level go down, and it will go down as the brake pads, the disc brake pads start to wear. I would just keep an eye on it. Make sure it stays in the safe zone, in that kind of minimum maximum zone. And if you see it get down near the lower end, go have the brakes checked, because as the brakes wear, fluid tends to be used up to make up for the difference in the brake pad wear. And that can be an indication that the brakes are almost to the point of wearing out. So again, something you need to kind of keep an eye on. So a little bit more things you can do that are simple. Check tire pressure. Use a gauge. A lot of cars today have tire pressure monitor systems. I prefer using a gauge because I know it's accurate. In very cold weather, tire pressure monitor systems don't work. When the weather gets cooler, and we have crazy weather today where it's warm, and then, before I left home 2 weeks ago, I shoveled 6 inches of snow, and then I raked leaves for a day because it was about 60 degrees outside. So as the temperature drops every time the temperature drops 10 degrees, you lose about a pound of pressure. Tires lose about a pound of air per month. So if you've kind of ignored your tires for 6 months, just on their own, they're going to be down 5 or 6 pounds. Temperature drops 15 or 20 degrees. All of a sudden now you're down another 3 or 4 pounds. Next thing you know, you have a tire pressure light that comes on. That's why a lot of people that have tire pressure monitor lights, that little TPS light that comes on in cold weather, because the weather gets cool, the tires have less air pressure in them. You drive the car for the day and the air pressure comes back up again because the tires get warm. But you should check the tires once a month, use a tire gauge. That's the best thing to do. Check tire tread depth is important. The penny picture, we used to say always take a penny, stick it in the tread. If it doesn't come up to the top of Lincoln's head, your tires are worn out. That is absolutely true. But a quarter works better because the different distance between the edge of a quarter and the top of Washington's head is about 4/32 of tread, twice as much as the distance between the edge of a penny and Lincoln's head. And 4/32 of tread is enough that will, if your tires are worn a little less than that, you won't get good traction in the wintertime. And more importantly, you'll get poor traction in wet weather. We did some testing where we compared tires that were down to 2/32 of tread to tires that were at 4 or 5/32. From 60 miles an hour on a wet road, the stopping distance went from, with the better tires, was about 70 to 90 feet shorter. So that's the difference between, that's more than the length of a tractor trailer truck. And so that's the difference in a panic situation between a crash and maybe one that didn't happen. So look at your tire tread. If they're worn or the tires are cracked or you see bulges or breaks, it's time for new tires. Checking and changing the air filter. All cars today have engine air filters. A lot of cars today have cabin air filters. The filters can be difficult to change in some cars, simple to change in other cars. Somebody wrote to me one day and they were at their dealer and the dealer said, and I remember the car, it was a Toyota Highlander, an SUV. They went to the dealer said, yeah, you need to replace both the cabin and engine air filters. And it was going to be, I don't know, $150. And the person said, you know, I don't think I'm going to do that right now. And they wrote to me and said, first off, do they really need to be changed? And they were under the impression that they were probably original in the car. So, and the car had 40 or so thousand miles on it. I said, chances are they do need to be changed. And they asked whether they could do it themselves. And in both of those cars, in both of those filters, they're relatively easy to change. So I sent her some instructions. She went to the local auto parts store, bought some good quality filters. She said they were about $20 a piece. The cabin air filter that keeps the air in the cabin clean is actually located behind the glove compartment. So you open the glove compartment door and there's a couple little tabs so the door folds down the rest of the way. You take all of your stuff out of your glove compartment. And then there was a little cover inside there. You pop the cover open and slide out the old air filter, put the new one in, put it back in. And the engine air filter, a little bit more work. The engine air filter was was one of these things that it was there was some snaps and clips, no screws though. So it was just a matter of just getting it all off and putting a new filter in. She emailed me back and said she saved herself $100. So there are things, again, you can do it yourself. Washing and waxing your car protects your investment. Obviously, the cleaner it is, it preserves the paint, keeps the paint looking good. Hand washing is the best thing you can do, but hand washing also requires a little bit of a little trickery, I guess, too, because you want to, the best way to wash a car, hand wash a car, is to use 2 buckets, one that your soapy water's in and one that you keep rinsing your sponge out with, so you're not washing your car with a dirty sponge and scratching the paint. So hand washing is better than an automatic car wash. Waterless car wash, which we're starting to see more and more of. The town that I live in has a water shortage in all summer, so you shouldn't be out there washing your car. So waterless car wash, you can go buy a bottle of waterless car wash at an auto parts store. It's a little expensive, probably $15 or $16. And what it does is it floats any dirt to the surface of the paint, and you wipe it off with microfiber cloths. You will need a lot of microfiber cloths to use waterless car wash, but it does a good job. I still prefer to, wash a car by hand when I can, because it also, you get to kind of evaluate the paint at the same time, any little chips and nicks you can take care of at the same time before they turn into rust spots. Waxing a car is important. Again, if you can do it 4 times a year is great. If you have a professional do it, that's okay too. If you only do it a couple times a year, that's fine. There's all different kinds of waxes. There is soft wax, spray wax. I tend to use spray wax kind of in between the hand waxing part, because it just keeps the car clean. The black Volkswagen that I have, it's a black car. It always looks dirty. So whenever I wash it, I go over it with kind of a spray wax afterwards, and use microfiber cloths to try to keep it clean. So the best place for car advice, does it come from me, AAA's Car Doctor? Does it come from, your Uncle Frank that has classic cars, or does it come from the owner's manual? The best information really comes from the owner's manual. The owner's manual was written for the car. It has all the specific information in it that you need to make sure that your car is in the shape it should be in. And Uncle Frank with his 57 Chevy or 56 Chevy there, he might know a lot about cars, but he might not know how often to change the engine coolant, or if your car has a timing belt, when it needs to be replaced. And some cars have timing belts, and they do need to be replaced. I just answered a question for a woman who said she has a Hyundai Santa Fe, and she can't get a straight answer whether her car has an engine timing belt or an engine timing chain. And not a difficult question to answer, but she needed to supply one more piece of information, which engine it had in it. Her model car, there was 2 engine choices, a 2.7 liter V6 engine and a 3.3 liter V6 engine. The 2.7 liter engine used a timing belt. The 3.3 liter engine used a timing chain. Timing chain should last forever. Timing belts need to be replaced periodically, in her case, every 75,000 miles. So that's kind of my, my presentation. If you need to get a hold of me, my email information is jpaul@aaanortheast.com, or you can go to AAA.com/car doctor, and there's a place there where you can put information in and ask questions and all kinds of other things. Let's see. I moved to oil changes to 4,000 miles rather than 3,000. The filter location in the Honda SI is awful. The little men who designed it, designed that in their cubicles, should be shot. And he said, and rotate every other oil change. I really believe in changing the oil filter every time you change the oil, rather than every other time. You're still changing your oil probably a little bit sooner than the manufacturer calls for. What year Honda SI is this? 2009. So it may be one of those things that you're able to change a little bit more often, and kind of get away with it. But I still do like trying to change engine oil as the manufacturer says so, but more importantly, I like to change the filter, because I think it's just important to change the filter, and their filters can change quite a bit. There are different kinds of types of filters on the market, I think it's just important to just do these things when you can, And you know, Honda's pretty good because it has a reminder when you should do things on your car. And it tells you, a little reminder thing comes on that says how often things should be done. All data, which Mark, you mentioned before you have at the library, all data says replace the engine oil in your car every 10,000 miles. So, you know, you're changing it every 4,000, you're changing the filter every other time. So that, you know, what's happening is when you're doing that, you're still not exceeding what the manufacturer calls for. So if you want to crawl under there, just drain the oil and leave the filter on there, that's fine, because you still haven't gone longer than the 10,000 miles-ish that Honda recommends. So, and you have that little wrench that comes on that tells you when things need to be changed. So let's see, I'm sure I'm changing more than necessary. I always change the oil at 100 miles when I buy a new one. If anything is going to come out, it'll come out very shortly when new. Yeah, that's something people used to do a lot of years ago. You would buy a new car and you'd run the engine 100 miles or so, change the oil, and if there was any metal pieces from machining or any of that kind of stuff that was in there, you would catch it in the oil filter, you drain it out. Not as necessary anymore. Now what happens, and one of the things you have to be a little bit, manufacturing is much better now. You're absolutely right. But also engine oil, factory fill engine oil. So they manufacture the engine, they test run the engine, they make sure the engine's going to be okay. And then the oil that's in there is designed to allow the engine to break in properly. So years ago, there was truly break-in oil. And I remember, if you remember the somewhat short-lived car, the Saturn. The Saturn was made by General Motors. It was an okay car. A lot of people, when they got that car, switched right over to synthetic oil because they were trying to do the best thing for their car. And I'm a big believer in synthetic oil. I put synthetic oil in everything that I own, including my lawnmower. But I don't change the viscosity. If it calls for 0.20, I use 0.20. If it calls for 530, I use 530. 1030, I use 1030, whatever it calls for, but I use synthetic oil. I don't use a synthetic blend. I use real synthetic oil. And people were switching over to synthetic oil, and what would happen was the engine wasn't fully breaking in. So because the oil was literally too slippery. And a good way to think of synthetic oil versus conventional oil, if, you know, oil does two things. It keeps everything moving, and it also controls engine heat. If your car is down a quart of oil, it will run a little bit hotter than it does when it's not down a quart of oil. And also the way it lubricates is important. Conventional oil, if you took a pool table as an example and put a variety of different sized balls on the table, a football, a pool ball, a basketball, a baseball, a soccer ball, all different sizes and shapes, and then put a piece of wood on top of all those balls and tried to roll it across the table. That's sort of conventional oil. The molecules are all different sizes. With synthetic oil, the molecules are all the same size. So, you know, put 6 pool balls all on the table, put that same piece of wood on top of it, and the piece of wood rolls smoothly across the table because all the molecules are the same size. That's why. Let's see. Oil coolers on air-cooled bikes. You know, help keeping the engine oil cool is important. Some motorcycles will certainly, when you're sitting in traffic, because air-cooled bikes are designed to have the air flowing across the engine. That's why you see all those fins in the cylinder head. The fins in the cylinder head aren't just there for design, although people do paint them. But the fins are there to dissipate heat on an air-cooled motorcycle. Adding an oil cooler to an air-cooled motorcycle just increases the fin capacity, because the oil cooler is like a radiator, and all those little fins on a radiator are designed to take away heat. So it helps lower the engine oil temperature. So adding an oil cooler to an air-cooled bike, especially if it's a bike that you're stuck in traffic more than you're riding, can certainly help bring the oil temperature down. A lot of times, some of these aftermarket oil coolers come with an oil temperature gauge, so you can actually see what it's doing. I've ridden a lot of motorcycles that were all air cooled. I never put an oil cooler on one. Never found the need to, although I rode a Harley Davidson out in Arizona once where it was really hot, and and it was getting really, really hot because of traffic. It just didn't have enough time to cool, and the engine was starting to get hot and starting to run poorly, actually, because it was getting so hot. So yeah, that's one of the things. So again, I'm a believer in synthetic oil. I wasn't, when I worked in a garage, when I worked as an auto mechanic, I wasn't a huge fan. I was like, why you change your oil every 3,000 or 4,000 miles? Why worry about it? True, if you change your oil often, but I was negative about synthetic oil mostly because of the cost. I must have written something somewhere, and an oil company sent me a case of 10W30 synthetic oil. So 12 quarts of 10W30 synthetic oil. So I put it in my wife's car because her car used 10W30 oil at the time, and just did a regular oil change and never really said anything that it was anything different. And she drove the car. It was coming into wintertime, and she drove the car like she would normally. And I said to her, did you notice anything different about your car? And she said, yeah, it actually seems to start a little quicker. And it also sounds quieter when it first starts. And the car probably had 40 or 50,000 miles on it at the time. So what I found was that engine temperature with synthetic oil dropped just a little bit, a few degrees. It lubricated better and quicker, which can't hurt. And I followed the owner's manual as far as oil change intervals. My Hyundai Santa Fe says change your oil every 6 months or every 7,500 miles. That's when I do it, even though I put synthetic oil in it. Synthetic oil is not required. In fact, the last time I changed oil, I had someone do it, and I kind of had to argue with them about using synthetic oil because that's the oil I wanted to use. So there you go. Let's see, every librarian should have a Hog and a Victory and a BMW and a Suzuki and a Yamaha. It's apparently you have a problem. Once, sometimes what happens, I'm fortunate, I guess, that I'm the only automotive enthusiast that I know of that doesn't have a garage. And that's kind of a good thing, because if I had a garage, I would have things like you have. I was talking with, there is on my radio show last week, I had a guy on the show, and he goes by the name of the Hack Mechanic. And he's an interesting guy. He owns 13 cars because he has garage space for 13 cars. And he tries to work on every one, and he writes for the BMW Roundel magazine and also for Haggerty's Collector Car magazine. But we were talking about how you sort of adopt some of these cars and you try to find something that needs a little bit of work. And the last book he wrote, I think, is called "It Ran When Parked." They never ran when they were parked. They were usually pushed into a place. So, Mark, good luck with the Victory, the BMW, the Suzuki, and the Yamaha. You just need to add a Ducati to the mix, and once you get that in there, you'll be good to go. So that's kind of my presentation. If anyone has a question about anything, again, the easiest way to get a hold of me is go to AAA.com/Car Doctor. If you want to listen to past Car Doctor radio programs, I put them on a podcast site. It's johnfpaul.podbean, Bean, BEAN.com. You can find there's hundreds of previous programs. I've been on a couple different radio stations in the past 15 years, so there's couple different stations I was on. Just about every program's on there, whether I have a guest or not, or if you just like to listen to other people's questions, you can find them there. The newspapers that I write for, Long Island Newsday today should be in my column, should be in the paper. The AAA publication, Your AAA, I'm in there periodically, online, boston.com and the Providence Journal sites, and some other weekly papers as well that may be in your area. I'm in a couple of papers in upstate New York as well. So there you go. Since you're out of Mass, we miss Tom and Ray. Yeah, Tom and Ray Magliozzi. Poor Tommy passed away a few years ago. Before he passed away, he actually literally died. He had a heart attack, and his wife found him and revived him, but he was actually kind of heart not working for about 10 minutes. They revived him, got him working. He took care of himself the way a lot of guys do. He still smoked a lot of cigars and drank a lot of cappuccino. Raymond, on the other hand, Ray is just a great guy. I bump into Ray every once in a while in Boston, or he's a big Red Sox fan. Sorry, Yankees fans. And but he's a big Red Sox fan. So once or twice every few years, I go see the Red Sox in Fenway Park, and I just so happen to run into Raymond when I'm there. But he's just a good guy. They're funny as can be. When they were together socially, they were exactly like they were in the radio show. They were just funny as can be, and they were just fun to be around and really, really smart. Tommy had a PhD in engineering, and Raymond, I think, has a master's degree in engineering and maybe a master's degree in chemical engineering. So again, really, really smart guys and funny guys and talented. They both played musical instruments, and not normal musical instruments. They played things like the banjo, which only seemed appropriate with them sometimes. So, and Doug Berman, their producer, was a third member of that crew. And the guy that I deal with, where I get my test cars from, is John Bugsy Sebastian Lawler, who at the end of the radio show, they would always thank him and they would add a whole bunch more to his name. And in fact, I talked to Bugsy Lawler just this morning before we did this. So anyway, thank you for having me. Thank you to the library for having me, and I appreciate it. And again, if people want to get a hold of me, AAA.com/Car Doctor is the best way to do it.
Thank you so much, Don. Really appreciate your time today.
Sure thing. Now I'm going to go back to being on vacation.
Okay, go be on vacation.
Okay.
Have a great day.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
All right. Bye.